In America today, a new kind of battle is being fought, not with guns or protests, but with something most of us carry in our pockets, a smartphone. A growing movement of individuals, calling themselves First Amendment auditors, are walking into public buildings and filming everything they see. They go to post offices, police stations, libraries, and city halls, asserting their right to record in public spaces. Their goal, they say, is to test whether our government officials respect the Constitution. They believe they are holding power accountable, ensuring that the First Amendment's protections of speech and the press extend to every citizen with a camera. This isn't just an American phenomenon. The idea has spread to other Western democracies like the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia, where citizens are also testing the boundaries of their rights to film in public. The core principle is the same everywhere. Public officials work for the people, and their actions in public buildings should be open to public scrutiny. These auditors argue that without constant vigilance, our rights can be eroded by bureaucrats and police who either don't know the law or choose to ignore it. They see themselves as a decentralized network of watchdogs using technology to bring transparency to the halls of power. But not everyone sees these auditors as heroes. Many government workers, police officers, and members of the public see them as provocateurs. They argue that the auditors aren't interested in genuine transparency, but are instead looking to create conflict for online entertainment. Critics label them frauditors, suggesting their activism is a fraudulent performance designed to generate clicks and ad revenue on platforms like YouTube. This clash of perspectives raises a fundamental question. Are these individuals brave citizen journalists defending our freedoms, or are they simply online personalities harassing public servants for profit and fame? The debate touches on some of the biggest issues of our time: the limits of free speech, the right to privacy, the role of government, and the power of social media. It forces us to ask what accountability really looks like in the digital age. Is a confrontational YouTube video a legitimate form of civic engagement, or does it just create more division and distrust? As these auditors continue to push the boundaries, communities across the country are forced to confront these difficult questions, often with no easy answers in sight. This movement is a messy, complicated, and important test of our constitutional principles in action. So who are these people behind the cameras? The movement is incredibly diverse, with no central leadership or formal organization. They are men and women from all walks of life, united by a belief in their right to film. One of the most well-known is Sean Reyes, who runs the popular YouTube channel Long Island Audit. He has become famous for his calm yet persistent style of confronting officials who try to stop him from recording. His videos often serve as educational tools for his followers, explaining the legal precedents that protect his activities and showing how ordinary citizens can stand up for their own rights. The roster of prominent auditors is long and varied. Channels like Auditing America, run by Anselmo Morales Torres, and Amagansett Press have amassed huge followings by documenting their encounters across the country. But it's not just men leading the charge. Women are also a significant part of the movement. Reagan Benson in Colorado, for example, combines her First Amendment audits with advocacy for the homeless, using her platform to shine a light on how municipalities treat their most vulnerable residents. Others, like Acura Amanda or the women featured on channels like Cult News, bring their own unique styles to the practice, proving that the desire for government accountability crosses all demographics. These individuals often refer to themselves as constitutionalists or citizen journalists. They see their work as a modern form of the free press, one that doesn't require a journalism degree or a corporate media badge. Instead, all it requires is a camera and a firm understanding of the First Amendment. They study court cases like Glick versus Cuniff, which affirmed the right to film police in public, and use this knowledge to challenge officials who try to intimidate them. Their YouTube channels become libraries of these encounters, offering real-world examples of citizens successfully defending their constitutional freedoms. However, the backgrounds of some auditors have drawn scrutiny and fueled the arguments of their critics. Some participants in the movement have been found to have criminal records, which detractors use to question their motives and credibility. For instance, Earl David Warden of News Now Houston was sentenced to a lengthy prison term for a past crime, a fact his critics often highlight to suggest the movement attracts bad actors. This complicates the narrative. forcing supporters to argue that a person's past shouldn't invalidate their constitutional rights or their ability to advocate for government transparency in the present. The world of First Amendment auditing is filled with dramatic and memorable incidents that have defined the movement. Perhaps one of the most talked about events involved Sean Reyes of Long Island Audit. In June of 2023, after a contentious interaction with a New York State trooper, Reyes took his protest to a whole new level. He hired a truck with a large electronic billboard and drove it to the trooper's neighborhood, displaying footage of their encounter. The act was a bold, in-your-face statement about accountability, but it also led to his arrest, sparking a massive debate about whether he had crossed a line from activism into harassment. Other auditors focus on different kinds of advocacy. In Colorado, Reagan Benson has become known for using her audits to amplify the voices of the homeless. She films their interactions with police and city officials, documenting what she argues is often unfair or illegal treatment. Her work isn't just about the right to record, it's about using that right to expose specific injustices. This approach has won her support from civil liberties groups and has resulted in tangible outcomes, including a significant legal settlement from the city of Denver after she alleged police retaliation for her work. Her story shows how auditing can be a tool for broader social advocacy. Not all audits end in confrontation or lawsuits. Sometimes they go exactly as planned, which auditors call a pass. In these videos, the auditor enters a public building, films freely without interference, and leaves. Public employees might be curious or cautious, but they ultimately respect the auditor's right to be there. These boring videos are just as important to the movement as the confrontational ones. They serve as proof that peaceful, lawful auditing is possible and demonstrate what a respectful interaction between citizens and their government should look like. They become the gold standard that auditors hold up when they encounter resistance elsewhere. But the most viral videos are almost always the ones that end in conflict. These are the fails, where an official, often a police officer or a small-town clerk, illegally demands that the auditor stop filming. These encounters can escalate quickly, involving arguments, threats of arrest, and sometimes actual arrests. A recent incident in Wichita Falls, Texas in early 2025 saw a 16-year-old auditor handcuffed and taken to a juvenile detention center for filming in a federal building, only to be released without charges. These moments become powerful online content, showcasing government overreach and reinforcing the auditor's narrative that their work is essential. To their many supporters, First Amendment auditors are modern-day patriots. They are seen as the front line in the defense of civil liberties, putting themselves in uncomfortable and sometimes risky situations to protect the rights of all Americans. The argument is simple. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech and the press, and in the 21st century, that includes the right of any citizen to record the actions of their government. Supporters believe that if this right is not actively exercised, it will be lost. These auditors, therefore, are performing a vital civic duty by keeping the government in check. This perspective views the auditors as an essential counterbalance to government power. They argue that traditional media outlets often fail to scrutinize local officials and police departments adequately. Auditors fill this gap, providing raw, unedited footage of how public servants behave when they think no one is watching. By live streaming or uploading their videos, they bring an unprecedented level of transparency to government operations. They expose ignorance of the law, bureaucratic incompetence, and sometimes outright abuse of power. In this view, every heated argument with a police officer is a lesson in constitutional law for millions of viewers online. Furthermore, supporters point to the educational value of these audits. The comment sections of their YouTube videos are often filled with people saying they never knew they had the right to film in a post office or a public library until they watched an audit. The auditors themselves frequently quote specific laws and court rulings during their encounters, turning a tense confrontation into a real-time civics lesson. They are teaching a generation of Americans about their rights in a way that is far more engaging than a high school textbook. They empower ordinary people to stand up for themselves when confronted by authority. This hero narrative is strengthened by cases where auditors have clearly exposed wrongdoing and achieved positive change. When an auditor is illegally arrested and later wins a lawsuit, it reinforces the legitimacy of their work. The settlement money is seen not as a personal windfall, but as a penalty that forces a city or police department to reform its policies and retrain its officers. In this light, auditors are not just creating content, they are forcing real-world accountability. They are the David fighting the Goliath of government bureaucracy, using only a camera and their knowledge of the Constitution as their slingshot. On the other side of the debate, critics paint a very different picture. They see First Amendment auditors not as heroes but as harassers who intentionally provoke public employees to create dramatic content for their YouTube channels. This viewpoint argues that the primary motivation is not civic duty but financial gain. The more outrageous the confrontation, the more views the video gets, which translates directly into more ad revenue, donations, and merchandise sales. This financial incentive, critics say, encourages auditors to be as disruptive and obnoxious as possible, because conflict, sells better than cooperation. This perspective is where the term frauditor comes from. It implies that the entire enterprise is a fraud, a dishonest performance of activism designed to mask a for-profit entertainment business. Critics point out that many auditors seem to seek out confrontations in places where they are likely to cause anxiety, such as small libraries or quiet town clerk offices where employees are not trained to handle such encounters. They argue that while the auditors may have a legal right to be there, they are exercising that right in a way that is unethical, designed to intimidate and bully low-level public servants for the amusement of an online audience. This narrative also highlights the potential for real-world harm. Critics worry that the auditors' aggressive tactics can disrupt essential government services and create a hostile work environment for public employees. When an auditor is loudly arguing with a librarian, other patrons can't enjoy the library. When police are tied up dealing with an auditor who refuses to identify themselves, they are not available to respond to other emergencies. Officials argue that this behavior erodes public trust and makes it harder for government to function effectively. It turns every interaction into a potential battlefield, fostering an us versus them mentality between citizens and their government. Moreover, opponents question the auditors' claims of being journalists. They argue that real journalists typically seek to gather information and report a story, while many auditors seem focused solely on provoking a reaction. They often refuse to answer simple questions about who they are or why they are filming, which critics see as a tactic to escalate the situation. Englewood Councilmember Joe Anderson, for example, defended his appearance on an anti-auditor show by stating it was a necessary way to push back against people he felt were not interested in dialogue, but in creating monetizable drama. This view holds that auditors are not protecting rights, but exploiting them for personal gain. The battle over First Amendment auditing isn't just fought in public lobbies and on YouTube, it's increasingly being decided in the courtroom. The legal landscape is a complex mix of victories for auditors and serious consequences for those who cross the line. On one hand, successful lawsuits have become a powerful tool for the movement. When an auditor is wrongfully arrested or has their right to film violated, they often sue the government agency involved. These lawsuits can result in significant financial settlements which not only compensate the auditor but also force municipalities to take the right to record more seriously. A prominent example is the case of Reagan Benson in Denver. In July 2024, she and her husband received a $130,000 settlement from the city. They had filed lawsuits alleging that the Denver Police Department had retaliated against them for their activism, particularly their work filming on behalf of the homeless population. This settlement was a clear victory, sending a message that harassing or intimidating citizens for exercising their First Amendment rights can have expensive consequences for a city. These legal wins are celebrated within the auditing community as proof that their methods are not only legally protected, but also effective at forcing institutional change. However, the law can also be a double-edged sword for auditors. Some have found themselves facing criminal charges and even prison time for their activities. Chris Cordova, who runs the channel Denver Metro Audits, was convicted in federal court on 2 counts related to his recording activities and was sentenced to jail. His appeal was denied in 2024, a decision that sent shockwaves through the community. The case demonstrated that while there is a right to film in public, that right is not absolute. It does not protect actions that are deemed to be unlawfully disruptive, threatening, or that interfere with official government proceedings in a prohibited manner. These legal troubles are often seized upon by critics as evidence that the frauditor label is accurate. They point to cases like Cordova's or the criminal history of individuals like Earl David Worden to argue that the movement attracts people who are not just testing rights, but are actively breaking laws. The legal doctrine of unclean hands is sometimes invoked, suggesting that individuals who engage in provocative or unethical behavior should not be surprised when the law doesn't protect them. These convictions and legal battles highlight the fine line auditors must walk between exercising a right and committing a crime. As the First Amendment auditing movement has grown, so too has a vocal and dedicated counter-movement. A number of YouTube channels and online communities have emerged with the specific goal of critiquing, debunking, and sometimes mocking auditors. These channels, often run by retired police officers, lawyers, or simply concerned citizens, analyze audit videos to point out what they see as hypocrisy, manipulation, and illegal behavior. They are the ones who popularize the term frauditor, and they see themselves as a necessary check on a movement they believe has gone too far. These anti-frauditor channels, like Frauditor Troll, operate by turning the auditor's own tactics against them. They take the raw footage uploaded by auditors and recontextualize it, adding commentary that highlights the auditor's aggressive behavior, their refusal to cooperate, or their apparent attempts to provoke a reaction. They dig into the personal histories of prominent auditors, exposing criminal records or questionable financial practices to undermine their credibility. This has created a kind of digital civil war, with auditors and their critics battling for the narrative, each claiming to be the true defenders of justice and public order. Public officials have also become more vocal in their criticism, adopting the language of the counter-movement. When Englewood council members appeared on Frauditor Troll, it signaled a shift. Instead of just reacting to auditors on the ground, some officials are now actively participating in the online debate, framing auditors as bad faith actors who are more interested in fame and fortune than in civil rights. They argue that these auditors are not representative of the general public, and that their confrontational style makes constructive dialogue impossible, thereby harming the very communities they claim to be serving. This counter-movement raises important questions about the nature of online discourse and accountability. Are these critics providing a valuable service by exposing the potential downsides of the auditing movement, or are they simply engaging in online harassment themselves? The auditors accuse these channels of doxing, publishing private information, and encouraging their followers to harass them and their families. The conflict has become deeply personal and vitriolic, moving beyond a debate about principles into a feud between rival online factions, with each side convinced of its own righteousness. At the heart of the controversy surrounding First Amendment auditors lies the issue of money. Nearly all prominent auditors monetize their YouTube channels. They earn revenue from the ads that play on their videos, collect donations from supporters through platforms like PayPal or Patreon, and sell merchandise branded with their channel logos. For critics, this financial element taints the entire enterprise. They argue that if the goal were truly about education and accountability, the videos would be posted on non-monetized platforms. The presence of a profit motive, they claim, proves that the auditors are primarily entertainers, not activists. This financial incentive, critics argue, creates a perverse feedback loop. The more dramatic, confrontational, and emotionally charged a video is, the more likely it is to go viral. More views mean more ad revenue. Therefore, an auditor has a direct financial incentive to escalate a situation rather than de-escalate it. A calm, polite interaction where an official respects the auditor's rights is good for civics but bad for business. A screaming match that ends in an arrest is a potential goldmine. This, for many, is the core problem. The pursuit of profit corrupts the pursuit of principle. Auditors and their supporters offer a different perspective. They argue that monetization is simply a way to fund their work. Activism, they point out, is not free. It requires time, travel, equipment, and sometimes significant legal fees. The revenue generated from their channels allows them to work on auditing full-time, traveling to different cities and holding more officials accountable than they could if it were just a hobby. They see the income not as profit, but as a salary that enables their public service, much like a non-profit organization pays its staff to carry out its mission. Furthermore, they contend that the monetization model is actually a more democratic form of funding than traditional media. They are not beholden to corporate advertisers or government grants. Instead, they are funded directly by their audience, the people who watch and support their work. If the public did not find value in what they were doing, they would not watch the videos or donate, and the channels would cease to exist. In this view, the financial success of an auditing channel is direct proof of its social value and a mandate from the public to continue its work of holding power to account. As the cameras continue to roll in city halls and post offices across the nation, we are left with a difficult and unresolved question. Is the First Amendment auditing movement a net positive for American democracy? There is no simple answer, because the movement itself is not a monolith. It is a messy, chaotic, and deeply human collection of individuals with varying motives and methods. On one hand, it is impossible to deny that these auditors have, at times, served as a powerful check on government power, forcing transparency where there was none, and educating millions about their constitutional rights. They have demonstrated that the First Amendment is not just a dusty piece of parchment, but a living document that ordinary citizens can use to demand accountability. Cases like Reagan-Benson's settlement in Denver show that their actions can lead to tangible reforms and financial consequences for government misconduct. In an era of declining trust in institutions, the auditor's raw, unedited footage offers a form of radical transparency that resonates with many people. They are a grassroots response to the feeling that government has become too powerful, too secretive, and too disconnected from the people it is supposed to serve. On the other hand, the criticisms of the movement cannot be easily dismissed. The frauditor narrative, which points to provocation for profit, highlights a genuine problem. When activism becomes intertwined with online entertainment and financial incentives, the lines between civic duty and self-interest can become dangerously blurred. The confrontational tactics, the criminal convictions of some auditors, and the rise of a hostile counter-movement all suggest that this form of accountability can come at a high cost, deepening social divisions and eroding the civility needed for a functioning democracy. Ultimately, the First Amendment auditing movement holds up a mirror to our society. It reflects both our cherished ideals of freedom and our modern obsession with online conflict. The central question may not be whether auditors are heroes or harassers, but rather what we, as a society, want accountability to look like in the digital age. Does true accountability come from a gotcha video that goes viral, or does it require a more patient, collaborative, and less theatrical approach? As citizens, we must decide whether the clicks, views, and drama are a worthwhile price to pay for the uncomfortable and sometimes necessary work of keeping power in check.